Flights are pricey, planning feels chaotic, and that trip that keeps getting pushed because you're too busy or travel's too expensive. Welcome to Points, Cards, and Travel. I'm Ross, the founder of Itinerary Boss. I've made the mistakes of doing this for 10 plus years so you don't have to. Each week, you'll get practical tools, point strategies, and expert guests with real use cases so you can travel better for way less using points and miles. On today's episode, I'm really excited to bring on Henah Velez. She's the writer behind Departure, a free weekly newsletter focused on travel for women and slow travel. Her posts range from interviews with leaders like Black Tomatoes co-founder Tom Marchant to suggested itineraries, points, miles, hacks, and tips. To her Departure newsletter has been recommended by outlets like Scott's Cheap Flights, The Good Trade, and Morning Brew. I'm super excited to have her on because we're going to dive into all things top travel trends for 2026, but also solo tips for women solo travelers, which I don't have experience in. So I'm super excited to bring her on. Now, on with the show. Quick thing before we bring on our guest, if you're new here, go ahead and grab my free 5 step roadmap to your next free 5 star luxury vacation and the one card that gets you there, which you can find in the show notes. Now, let's bring on our guest and get into it. Welcome back to Points, Cards, and Travel. And on today's episode, we have a repeat guest, Henah Velez. We're talking all things female solo travel tips, as well as travel trends that you're going to want to look out for. Hey, Henah, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me back, Ross.
Of course, yeah. This is exciting, and I don't have experience here with solo female travel, so I gotta lean in on you to give me the tips and also just travel trends, right? You write,
Mhm.
you hear what's going on, you've done solo travel, so yeah, it really excited to learn more from you. But just we're just kicking off 2026. Everyone's finally getting out of their January jumpstart, dry January. Everyone's ready to start
Mm.
traveling and planning, hopefully. So, what are some of the biggest travel trends that you're paying attention to right now?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a little bit of a broken record because I think anyone who's been online will say this, but everyone's biggest travel trend in 2026, I think, is going analog. So trips that are going to make you put your phone down, put your phone away, slower destinations versus whatever is, crowded or on a top 10 TikTok listicle. I know for me, like using a film camera has been really fun because it feels like I'm more present and grounded in the moment. And just things like embracing boredom, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but kind of putting aside what looks good on Instagram and more about wellness travel, finding yourself travel, hobby travel, that kind of thing, are the big travel trends that I'm seeing from different DMOs and travel operators.
I love it. All right. So if you're on Instagram or TikTok and you're listening, don't go to these places. Make sure you keep going to Santorini with the blue domes and
Right.
getting the blue dresses and all
That
that. But no,
was
that
actually my worst vacation ever was in Santorini because we got hit by a Mediterranean hurricane and we were stranded on Santorini, which sounds so nice, but it's not nice when it's 50 degrees and rainy and windy. And the time we were there was us just waiting in line for people in their flowing dresses with the photographer person. So yes, that's not my type of travel anymore, but kudos to you if you're willing to put yourself through that.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly we went in September and that's like we were my wife, my best friend and his wife, we were just cracking up because that's like it's exactly like we're like, look, we just walked right there and we got a picture of the blue dome that no one would even know if you went to right where everyone goes with the selfie sticks and everything. So no,
Yeah.
I agree with you and I think it's very true. I think you go on Instagram and it's like, oh, you got to go here, best beach, and and then sometimes it's not that or it's super crowded. So you have to, once you see that, that's great, but you need to look into, okay, what are people saying online? Like, what really is this about? And I agree. Yeah, we just did Grand Cayman in November and like I left my phone in the hotel pretty much the whole time.
Oh,
And
you're brave.
it was great. Yeah. I mean, I brought it out a little bit, but I would just leave it on the charger and like just relax
Yeah.
and read a full book.
Yeah. I mean, I think from a perspective of people just feel like they're doom scrolling all the time, they feel like things are not in a good place. So I think anything that kind of gets people grounded in the moment is really in, but also just like, I don't know, that experience, while it was really nice to be in Greece, it's like the things I remember were being stuck in a line behind people watching someone take their photo. And it wasn't, oh, I got to see this beautiful sunset. And it's like, I didn't get to see the beautiful sunset because there were 80,000 other people there
Yeah.
blocking the view. So, teach their own, but it's definitely for better or for worse, to have the TikTok, viral video deciding where people go.
Yeah, I'm thinking about getting the Meta glasses too. That way I don't have to take out my phone and I can just go boom and be done. And
Yeah.
that's I think that's on my list. But I guess from a trend specifically, like solo travelers, especially women, are there any specific destinations or anything like that?
Yeah, like I said, I think that wellness travel is really big, but I think a huge other trend is people leaning into their interests. So, reading retreats are really big. I think the last couple years, farm to table workshops, those kinds of things. I think it appeals to women a lot in that sense versus more of that adventure style that's been trending the last 10 years of I'm gonna go, you know, climb this mountain or I'm going to climb this skyscraper or I'm going to go to Antarctica or whatever, which obviously are still wonderful trips to go on. But I think also just from a safety perspective, having access to technology is invaluable for solo women travelers just to make sure that they're okay. But I think that in that trend specifically of looking at what they enjoy and their hobbies and wellness, there's a lot of beauty in slowing down and finding that space for themselves. And I think this is especially true for women who tend to take on emotional labor at work or invisible labor in their households, or they have eldest daughter energy like I do. There's just a lot of reasons that people are looking for something that's not just an escape, but more of like a revitalization of who they are and what they care about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess for women who haven't traveled solo before, are you seeing them just dive headfirst in and go by themselves? Are they doing like semi-solo travel, maybe with one other person or meeting up with people? Like what are some of the trends there?
Yeah, I think it's actually a mix, but TripAdvisor in November 2025 did a report that said solo travel is the fastest growing sector of tourism. And in that sector, women and especially women over 45 were some of the fastest growing ranges. And I think that's because for elder women who are still able to travel, they often live longer on average. So they have more expendable income or an inheritance, or if they've reached financial independence, they have the money to spend. I think also now that there's more technology and I can just say, okay, I'm airdropping you my location, or I always have my location shared with you, it's easier to be like, okay, I'm going to go somewhere for a week by myself because I can check in. But I also think that women are just tired of waiting for someone else, whether it's their partner. Like my husband, he only gets 20, not only, he gets 20 PTO days, but I have unlimited PTO. And so a lot of times it'll be him being like, well, we did our two trips. I really don't have much else. Or they're waiting for their grown children to join or a friend who's always busy. And so I think a lot of women are like, hey, I'm just going to travel while I still can and figure it out on my own. And I do think there's also a spike in travel companies that are curating more women and solo supported group tours. So, for example, 2 years ago, I went with El Camino Travel to Oaxaca for like a Day of the Dead themed trip. And I was a solo by myself going on the trip, but I came out with friends that I still talk to today. So I think there's a couple groups and tour companies like that that are really focused on specifically even older women travelers. But I do think that that shift is here to stay, and people are wanting to just travel even if no one goes with them. But I do think a lot of people are leaning into either partner travel, or solo inside of a larger group.
If this episode is helping you out, could you hit that follow or subscribe button and also leave a quick 5-star rating wherever you're listening? Yeah, well that's good to know because I think the first thing most people, if they've never done it, is, well, I can't do it solo. So the fact that there's
Mm-hmm.
different resources and there's other people who are doing it, and like we would stay in, hostels are big, right, in Europe when you're younger, and it's like, hey,
Yeah.
they are curated for solo travelers, and you go to, the main room, the common rooms, and like they're putting together that, so it's kind of that feel. Just as you're older, a lot of times people probably aren't staying right in
Yeah.
32 person room hostels, but it's
Yeah. I
some
mean,
people, hey,
more power to you. I think
yeah.
I used to stay in hostels in my 20s. I think there's just like a safety factor, which we can also talk about, of just like, I don't know, I'm at the age where I'm going to pay a little bit more just to have my own personal space. But I do think it's something you can still do, even if you're on a budget. Even it doesn't have to be breaking the bank.
100%. And we'll get into that here with some points and miles. But are there specific destinations, best value experience you're seeing that people are going to?
Yeah, going, or I guess they were formerly called Scott's Cheap Flights. They had this really nice tip a couple months ago for best value travel, which is they would say look at a regional hub that you want to go to and try to pick a city that's maybe a little bit outside of that hub. So you're still kind of in this populated place, but you have a little bit more room for yourself. It's less expensive. It's not as busy. So, for example, a couple years ago, my husband and I went to Rome, and then we went to Tuscany, and we ended up staying in this beautiful, beautiful hotel on the western side of Tuscany, kind of on the coast, which is a place that most people don't even consider or look at. And so it was the most, luxurious stay I could imagine, and it was only $300 a night. I mean, I know $300 is not cheap, but it definitely was not, breaking the bank at that point for the kind of experience we were having. And so that's something that I'm actually repeating again this year, which is to go to that space because it's kind of a milestone for me. My husband and I are doing IVF, and I was like, okay, I'm going to gift myself one really nice trip before we do an embryo transfer. And so that's somewhere where I'm going, and it's a little bit off the grid, right? It's not something that everybody's going to. And then I talked to Black Tomatoes co-founder. They're a luxury travel company for the last 20 years. He said destinations like Taiwan are really high value and high experience, which coincidentally, I'm actually headed there next month, which was like great timing for me. But frankly, I think that like money can be very important if you're traveling solo and you're not splitting the cost, right? Because it's like, well, if I get a $300 room, me and my husband, that's 150 each. Like I can justify that. And that's kind of where those premium credit card travel perks can come in. So for example, I'm going to Paris for 2 nights this summer, after I go to Italy, and there's a new hotel chain credit with Chase. Um, that works with like IHG and Minor and Omni and Pendry and Virgin and whatever. And so I was able to use that for 2 nights. That would have been $800, but they had a points boost on it. So I applied the minimum amount of points boost to get it to $600. They had a Chase Travel $100 credit, so I applied that. So it was $500, and then they had the 250 hotel chain credit. So it was 250 for 2 nights, peak summer in Paris. So I feel like there's different ways to get a lot of value without spending a lot of money. But it feels like, okay, I know I'll be safe. I'm in a busier area in a hotel in a busy time of year. Um, so it gave me that safety, but it wasn't like I was, having to spend a lot of money to do it.
Yeah, and that's where some of these premium credit cards, right? If you know how to use the credits that they offer, it can help offset,
Yeah,
250, $500, especially with the reserve. And that's something that's really important. Before we get into points and miles, though, I just want to, from safety standpoint, you touched on it a little bit, but are there any other things that you would say, hey, make sure you prioritize if you are doing a solo trip?
for sure. Yeah, I'm always sad that I have to say this, but I guess a couple tips would be, always make sure you have your location shared with people you trust. Ideally, there's someone within the vicinity of where you are, just in case there's an emergency. But if you're going to Taiwan and you don't know anybody, I get that. Some people, like I know my best friend actually prefers staying at an Airbnb that has a personal host that they meet one-on-one. I actually prefer the security of a larger space, like a hotel chain with a concierge, but that is something that you want to decide for yourself. But generally, you want to prioritize a good location. You don't want to be like, oh, I got a great deal, but it's in this shitty neighborhood. I don't think that's a good way to look at it most of the time. I always try to land during the day before it's dark out, or I'll spend the extra money on a flight that doesn't have layovers because for me that means I'll be more well rested. I'm going to be more alert, more awake. I also think you want to look at reviews that mention safety specifically, and especially from like a solo traveler lens, because I think there's a lot of places that will say, oh, great for families or great for couples, but is it good for people who are by themselves? Does it feel safe? And I actually have a post on how to safely meet people, even if you're introverted like I am. And it could be things like silent book club meetups, walking tours, curated workshops, that kind of thing, because I don't think that the fear or anxiety of solo travel should stop you from meeting people who might, become a long-term connection for you, but you definitely want to trust your gut. And I would find generally like if something feels off to you, then trust that feeling and have a plan for how you would get out of it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well said. All very good tips, and
Well,
make
you're
sure.
a, you're a pro in female solo travel,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
there you go.
I'm actually heading out to Colorado as we're recording this next week. It was supposed to be a solo snowboarding trip, but my family's going to be out
Nice.
there and cousin,
Oh,
and so yeah, I've done one solo snowboarding trip, and yeah, that's really it. I got
Hmm.
people who want to travel, so I have to plan it all. So that's I don't get to
Well,
just show
it's worth
up.
the trade-off, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess for some people, if they're, just getting into points and miles, you mentioned, right, the hotel credits, the points boost,
Hmm.
like, are there different flexible points and miles strategies that can help for solo travelers? And I think one thing before you get to it is like, I think flexibility, right?
Hmm.
You don't have to worry about booking for six people. You have availability to get that. But curious, are there other like strategies that you've used or others have used?
Yeah, I mean, flexibility is the big thing for me. I think back in the day when, did you ever subscribe to the points deal on Twitter? This was like
Mm-mm.
2014.
No.
There was one flight deal that came up and it was $179 from New York to Amsterdam, Prague, and Milan. And I don't know why they would make it $179, but they did. I booked it because I had the flexibility of like, I'll just figure out the PTO and work it out. And they honored that ticket. So, to be able to go to three European cities for that little, like that paid off fairly quickly. That wasn't, with points and miles, but like generally, if you're flexible, more, you know, like saver routes, I would call them, are gonna pop up. I also think just having a few different cards with different programs is key. So, essentially, no matter the airline, you'll figure out a way to get there. That could be Bilt, it could be American Express, it could be Capital One, it could be Chase, and there are cards that are $0 annual fee that still give you that access. So it's not like you have to pay a premium. I think a really good beginner card for anyone who wants to get involved is like the Chase Sapphire Preferred, which I think is $95 for the first year, but still has a sizable sign up bonus and one that most people could probably hit in a couple months. But it would be able to pay for like a full round trip flight or two round trip flights, depending on how you use it. But yeah, to your point, Going's flight deals are a great example of like if you have flexibility, they'll just be like, hey, if you can leave in 2 weeks, you can go to Australia for 20,000 points. And you're like, well, I work remote, so
Yeah.
sure, why not? Uh, but it's not always doable for everybody, but I do think it makes it a little bit more accessible and more affordable. And I wouldn't even say less stressful. I think you have the stress of like trying to figure it out for yourself, but if you can, I think it could be well worth it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the flexibility is huge. And outside of just solo female travel, even like retirees, like my parents are
Mm,
finally getting into points. And you mentioned the Chase Sapphire Preferred, and I know we talked built on a former episode, but like they're now getting those type of points, and I'm like, you guys have a competitive advantage. You guys can go whenever.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, you're gonna have the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday travel from whenever, wherever, and you have that flexibility. So if you have that, I think that's, that is good. And if you can say, hey, I do work remote, because yeah, I see those deals pop up and I'm like, that looks great, but I can't just go to this place in 3 days, right? It
Right.
just,
And I think also like it depends on your life stage, right? Like
yeah,
if I had a newborn, I'm not going to be like, well, see you in 2 weeks to my husband, but
yeah.
I do think
We wanted to thank you for listening in and mention if you want help applying this to your own spending and trip planning strategy, that's exactly what the Reward Strategy Lab community is for. You can find details if you want to join within our show notes. Now, back on with the show.
there's value in everybody taking time for themselves. Even if you do have to plan in advance, if you're willing to plan in advance, I still think you can find pretty good flight deals for 40 or 60,000 points instead of 80 or 100 or whatever, or having to pay out of pocket. So just
Yeah,
something where like having a long lead time, I think can be big.
100%. You mentioned a couple just like stays, tips there. Are there
Mhm.
any, I think hotels are like, I like that because, right, you're going in, you're checking in, you have, right, that sense of security, that concierge. Are there any specific brands or is it just more, hey, it's just a hotel?
Yeah, I am unfortunately not like a hotel loyalist. I think I just kind of pick whichever one feels safest. But I've never really had a bad experience at anywhere like a Kimpton or, I mean, I would love to say the Four Seasons. We're not quite there. But just I think Shangri-Las are great. Like there's a lot that you can get a lot of bang for your buck, especially in lower cost of living cities that aren't, they're like $200 or $300 a night, but you have this really nice experience. And a lot of those with the Amex Fine Hotels and Resorts program, and sorry if I'm getting a little too in the weeds, but like they also have that credit that you can use on site to check out late, check in early, you get breakfast, you get the $100 credit. So it kind of can pay for itself pretty quickly.
Yeah, 100%. And I think if you have points and you're starting to look at those hotels, like that's a really good way to do it. And if you're a traveling professional who, right, is a road warrior and has racked up a lot of points, that is a great way to utilize those. But if you have
Hmm.
flexible points, similar to what we talked about on a former episode with Henah around Built or others that she's mentioned around Chase, Amex, Capital One, like seeing how those can also play into where you're going. Because you can find an example when we're going to Cape Town, South Africa, the Hyatt Regency, which is smack dab in the middle, is 3.5 thousand, like 3,500 point Hyatt points, which
Oh,
is
I thought you were going to say
insane.
$3,500, and I was going to
No,
be like,
no,
what?
but it's yeah, but I mean it's like that's crazy. And then
Yeah, yeah.
which but that's I mean and that's a nice hotel that people rave about. But like those are some of the things that, if you are looking at hotels, thinking through, and then if you have credits, also looking at where can they stretch the furthest? Because you may have an Edit hotel credit or a Amex, right?
Hmm.
But it may be $800, and you're like, okay, well, I'm shaving off a little bit, but you may find some that are really good, and you can use those and pretty much have your hotel covered for.
Yeah, and I will say, just to add to that, I often find that if you work with a knowledgeable travel agent, they will also be able to like maximize your points and money out of pocket for you. So, for example, like I said, we're going to Taiwan, and in Taipei, our travel agent, like we had booked 2 nights on our own with the Amex credit because that was a credit we already knew we had. And then she was able to get us another 2 nights at the same hotel where we don't have to switch rooms, but she was able to get kind of the same discounted price and still offer the same benefits. So it's kind of like double dipping. And so if they know what they're doing, I think that can also go a long way. And if you're someone who's never solo traveled before, and you're sitting on points or you have that kind of um, access to those programs, I think travel agents are often free and get commission from the hotel themselves. So it could be a really good use case to go work with somebody who knows that stuff in and out.
Yeah, 100%. We talked about how far in advance, right? If you have that flexibility, it's it's kind of all over the, spectrum where you can decide. But if someone wants to take, let's just say someone says, "Hey, this year I want to do it. I have points or I don't and I just want to go do it." Like what's one thing they should just go ahead and start doing today that will help them accomplish that?
I actually have an entire post on how to ease into your first solo trip that I can share with you, Ross, if you'd like to share it. But um, I kind of have an order, which is one, I'd say get comfortable going on solo dates or solo day trips by yourself. If you're someone who gets really nervous, like just going out to eat by yourself, you might want to like work up to a solo trip. So, go on a solo date with yourself, go on a day trip to another neighboring town. I think it's really important to remember your why. So, for example, like I like to remember what annoys me when I'm traveling with other people. Like I am not someone who likes to get up at, the crack of dawn. And so something like that is important for me to be like, why am I doing this on my own? I like to write out my greatest fears and concerns. And I know that sounds kind of woo-woo, but I think what it does is it like puts it down on paper and says, what is the likelihood that these things will happen? But also, what can I do to prevent them from happening? And then on the flip side, what are the opportunities that I might be able to gain from doing this trip on my own? Um, and for some people, that's just like the self-confidence and like the self-trust that I'm going to get through it and be okay. And then I usually like to think of a place where, if it's your first solo trip ever, a place where you'd like to go where you know at least one person who lives nearby. So, for example, like, and I would say ideally a language that you feel comfortable speaking. So, for example, London, I think is a great example of like, I know people who live in London, or I have a community of family members that live there. I know I can speak English to go there. It's fairly straightforward to get to. There's not a lot of layovers from the US. And that feels like kind of the easiest way to get comfortable. And then even if you're just booking a night or two, I would say like try to book a short-term trip just to get yourself like into that mode. Um, I mean, obviously, if you feel like you could do a whole week or 2 weeks, that's amazing. But definitely don't feel pressure that you have to, for your first solo trip, spend, a month backpacking. It could just be a long weekend somewhere, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, again, it's start with, baby steps, walk before you go
Yeah,
sprint and run a
yeah.
marathon. I think but I like how, and yeah, definitely if anyone's interested, we'll link Hannah's post because I think it is important, right? If you're uncomfortable not going and just sitting and eating by yourself, like hopping on a plane to then go to Bali, right, for 24 hours might be a little bit of a stretch. So I like how you break that down. I never really thought of it that way. And maybe that's why
Yeah.
I don't have the fear of, traveling as much because I spent so many days on the road in the medical device field, stopping at Wegmans,
Mm.
eating sushi alone. That's
Well, I think also like particularly for women, like I'm 5 feet tall, I'm a woman of color, I'm not someone who knows 1,000 languages. I think for me, like safety is always the thing that's like, what's my fear?
Mhm.
My fear is safety. And
Yeah.
so once I started writing that down, I was like, okay, but I can make a plan. Like I
Yeah.
can do these things and I can figure it out. And so I think once you get more comfortable with, I can be by myself for 4 days, I can, figure it out. I can have printed directions if I need to in case my phone dies. Like there's other ways, I think, at this point, to not let that fear stop you. And so for me, that was like, okay, if I was to do this from scratch, what are the 5 steps I would take? And that's kind of what I landed on. But I would like to think it works. So if you
Yeah.
try it, let me know.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I think people appreciate probably more than you think writing that and like sharing that
Mm,
because it is those things, right? For you and I, where we travel a lot and we've done this and become second nature, like these are just habits. But when you first start out, it's always thinking back to like that 21, 22-year old who's like, okay, I'm going to book it, but I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. We're just going to figure it
yeah.
out. And then you start to realize, okay, if you plan for it, it becomes a repeatable system. But again, it's getting that plan in place, and that's for solo trips, that's for group trips, that's for if you want to travel on points. That's where you align, like we talked about in our former episode, your credit card strategy to max. So like it all comes down to really just planning. And but I like how you said write down a few things and don't try to go conquer everything. It's just take
Hmm.
those baby steps and then it'll start to build and compound from there.
And I think also just plan for something to go wrong. It's okay. Like that's a lot of I think a lot of why travel is successful for a lot of people is they're willing to say, okay, I'm gonna have to pivot my plan for this day, or this train left without me. I'll catch the next one. And I think you kind of have to be okay with that if you're on a solo trip. But I believe in everybody; they can do it.
100%. And for someone who's done it for a long time, my wife and I on our honeymoon had to pivot from we were going to the PP Islands and we ended up in a Thailand hospital from heat
Mm,
exhaustion and we had to miss
I'm so
that and then
sorry.
find a new hotel. But since we booked it the morning of, it was like 50% off and we then got upgraded for like $50 to this like
Nice.
1,800 square foot
Oh
villa
my
suite
gosh.
overlook. So it was but it's like we didn't plan for that. We had this awesome, and it was like, but just having those things and doing it and knowing if something goes wrong, like you have to be able to pivot. And things do
Hmm.
go wrong for experienced travelers like myself and like you and everyone
Can I
else.
add one last thing on that note?
Yeah.
Get the travel insurance. Please do not skimp on travel insurance. Go to squaremouth.com and just put in all the information for your trip. Pick a policy that works for you because inevitably, when something goes wrong, you do not want to be like, oh, I have no coverage for this, or it's going to stress me out to pay $300 for a last minute hotel and not get reimbursed. So, every single international trip I do, I always buy trip insurance. And that's like the additional peace of mind that if something were to go wrong, I can like call the emergency number, talk to them, or file a claim at some point. Because, yeah, to your point, like I've had friends who had to be air vac'd from Thailand to India because they had typhoid fever. I've had friends in hospitals because they got typhoid. Like, I don't know why I have so many friends that have typhoid, but my point being that like you never know what's going to happen and you want to be protected. And that $200 that you might spend on a policy will be so worth the peace of mind that you get out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely agree. And if you have any of those premium credit cards too, just check to see what
Hmm.
insurance comes with those. And always, if they have those premium insurances, make sure you book everything with those. Even if it's you book with points and it's a $5.60 charge for tax and fees, book with that because that covers
Yep.
you. So
Yep.
just some other tips and pointers around travel insurance. But no, I think this has been really helpful. And I know you came on another episode, but if someone hasn't listened to that, Hannah, where can our listeners find you?
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for having me as a repeat guest. And if people want to chat, I'm at quiettravel.substack.com and it's called Departure. And you can find me also on Instagram at Henah, Henah.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. She's Henah Velez.
Yeah.
I'm Ross Alcorn. Appreciate you tuning in. We will see you all next week. Really appreciate you tuning in today. Before you go, again, if you're new here, grab my free 5 step roadmap to your next free 5 star luxury vacation and the one card that gets you there in the show notes. The main takeaway from today is you don't need more time or money to travel better. You just need a simple plan and the right strategy in place. My final thought is travel is supposed to feel exciting, not overwhelming. Take one thing you learned today, apply it this week, and your next trip gets easier starting now. We'll see you next episode. Really appreciate you tuning in.